Now, today is All Saints' Day. We begin this month of looking backwards and forwards by looking towards those that we remember in our lives. And I love both Halloween and All Saints' Day. I think they complement each other. I think they are two parts of a whole. For together, they provide an opportunity to acknowledge the fearful aspects of life and then to embrace the hopeful, to recognize our shadow side, along with all that we value as good. So today, All Saints' Day, we pause our forward-moving thoughts and plans, and we consider the loved ones, friends, acquaintances who have had an impact on our lives. And it's a good spiritual practice to take time to feel gratitude and joy, the joy that they brought us, and also to accept the emptiness in the places we no longer get to share with them, the silence where their voices used to ring, and admit to some ongoing sadness for things left unsaid or unresolved. For we all have saints to remember, the people who have touched our lives, shaped our lives, those that we lost too soon, and even the ones who are still living and walking among us. Because we understand that the word saint is not limited to great figures of history, doesn't just belong to people who have seemingly earned it by doing great things. Now, our remembrance today includes all the accidental saints, those who often, without even knowing it, made a mark on our lives. Those people who have molded who we have become with the imprint of their interactions with us, making an impression that has changed us. Now, the people whose lives connect with our lives every day or sometimes just in passing, they leave an empty space when they're gone. But we are people who live in hope that we will be together again in some way. We are people of hope, and the scriptures that we read and the ones we read this morning give us words and images of hope. Now, our gospel story, although it may not sound like it at first reading, gives us signs of hope, a kind of hope. For in speaking to and about the religious leaders of his time, Jesus said, "Do whatever they teach you and follow it, but do not do as they do, for they do not practice what they preach. They tie up heavy burdens hard to bear, and they lay them on the shoulders of others, and they themselves are unwilling to lift a finger to move them." We often worry about our loved ones who maybe weren't religious enough, those who never proclaimed a clear faith, a no doubt about it, this is what I believe. Some of them may have been downright anti-religious in their lives. And yet, I believe that if we knew their whole story, we would understand that there was good reason for this. It might just have been that someone sometime tied up heavy burdens that were too hard for them to bear and put them on their shoulders until they had had enough and moved on. For I believe that Jesus is often saying to us that being religious is not as important to God as being authentic and humble and true to the truth as you know it, doing the best with what you have, and leaning on God's unconditional love and grace for all the rest. I also think in this passage, Jesus was suggesting that we should not idolize the people in our lives. We should not idolize our leaders or our loved ones. Don't put your loved ones on a pedestal because they don't want to be there. They would want to be loved for who they are, remembered for all that they were, with their strengths and their flaws, with their mistakes and their successes, for that is what we all want, to be known and loved for exactly who we are. And we can be people of hope for those who've gone before us, people of hope in the lives that we lead now. In John's vision that we read today, this is a vision of hope for the future and one that doesn't leave anyone behind. It is a vision of the eternal presence of God, the communion of the saints of all times and places. This passage from Revelation describes a great multitude. It's beyond counting. It includes people from every tribe and language. There's no limit to the scope of this multitude, not geographic or ethnic, not language or economic. For in this passage from Revelation, we glimpse a cosmic communion, this beatific vision that all creation is destined for. When John writes, I looked and there was a great multitude that no one could count, truly from every nation and tribe and people and language, standing before the throne. And the one who is seated on the throne will shelter them. And they will hunger no more, thirst no more. The sun will not strike them, nor any scorching heat. For the Lamb will be their shepherd and will guide them to springs of water of life, and God will wipe away every tear from their eyes. Now, John, in writing this beautiful vision, wanted to give words of encouragement to what was then a struggling community. People who were living in uncertain times. People who had heard of the life and the teachings, the death and resurrection of Jesus, and they were striving to live and speak this language of the kingdom of God at a time when doing so was dangerous and costly. And they had been suffering so much that some of them were beginning to wonder if it all wasn't just hopeless. So John, in writing to this struggling community, pulls back the curtain of history in order to show them a celebration going on in heaven, a future filled with those who, like themselves, had endured a great ordeal of living in dangerous times, and who now, transformed, were together praising God with joy. This was John's way of saying to them and speaking into the future to us to have courage. You are moving towards the kingdom of God. Your life now in the middle of time has meaning now and for the future. The church looks at time, the time that we are living in now, and asserts that because we have glimpsed this future through the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ, because God, through Jesus Christ, has begun an ongoing redemption of all ages, all of time is charged with new possibility. The New Testament never uses the word saints singularly. It's always the saints in plural. We live into God's future when we look around and we see the people around us as saints, real saints, imperfect people, people always in need of grace and always receiving grace, always forgiven and always forgiving, understanding and listening and sharing what little bits of wisdom and love we have with one another. So on this All Saints' Day, we join with Christians around the world, gathering to celebrate the lives of those who have gone before us. We give thanks for those saints that are living with us today, appreciating even more deeply the joy as well as the struggles of living together in families and communities. We celebrate the promise of God's future, by sharing the Lord's Supper, something we do regularly as a part of our community, and something we do knowing that we are doing this with people around the world and through the past and into the future. So now let us share this meal together and prepare our hearts in prayer.